Hello, welcome to the channel. Subscribe, leave a like, and don't forget to write a comment. Enjoy watching.
On my birthday this year, I bought myself a cupcake from a gas station down the road, the kind that's sealed in plastic with frosting so thick it tastes like sugar glue. I sat in my parked car outside the pharmacy, engine running because it was cold out, watching people come and go with their bags of prescriptions, greeting cards, and snack packs. Nobody looked twice at the woman in the gray Honda Civic singing "Happy Birthday" to herself in a whisper. I struck a match from an emergency box I keep in the glove compartment, held it over the cupcake, and let the tiny flame flicker for a few seconds before blowing it out. I didn't make a wish. What was the point? 5th year in a row. 5th. And still not a single message, not a happy birthday from my mother, my father, or my sister Rachel. That was the moment I realized something wasn't numb anymore. It was hot, bitter, alive. I opened my phone, more out of habit than hope, and there it was, a bright little notification from the family group chat. For a moment, I felt something lift in my chest. A flicker. Maybe they hadn't forgotten. Maybe I just needed to be patient. Maybe. Then I opened it. It was a photo of Rachel standing in front of a shiny black SUV with a giant red bow on top, her arms stretched wide like she'd just won the lottery. And Mom standing beside her with that too-tight smile she always reserved for special moments captured on camera. The caption said, "Surprise for our girl. She works so hard and deserves it. Love you, Rach." That was it. That was the message. Nothing else in the chat. I scrolled up, just to double-check, past the Thanksgiving turkey photo, past the recipe link Rachel sent, past the meme Dad forwarded about aging boomers, past the picture of Rachel's kid in a Halloween costume that I dutifully heart-reacted to. Then I saw it, my last message, sent 3 weeks ago. "Hey, I might be in town next month. Anyone around for dinner?" Left on read. Blue check marks. No reply. No "we'll see." Not even a thumbs up. I leaned back in the seat and just stared at the dashboard, wondering why this year stung more than the others. Maybe because I'd started to believe that if I didn't expect anything, I couldn't be hurt. But this was something else. This was a reminder. A perfectly wrapped gift of proof that I wasn't even a blip on their radar anymore. They'd somehow managed to both forget and celebrate someone else in front of me, and they didn't even notice. For a while, I just sat there, the cupcake slowly turning stale in its wrapper. I thought about texting back, writing something casual and breezy like, "Wow, nice ride." Or maybe something passive-aggressive, like, "Glad someone's getting celebrated today." But every version felt hollow. It wasn't about the car. Hell, it wasn't even about the cupcake. It was about 5 years of birthdays with no phone calls, no cards, no cake. It was about the fact that they never noticed they weren't noticing. I scrolled through my own photos, just out of spite. My last 5 birthdays, quiet dinners alone, a selfie at a wine bar, a movie ticket stub tucked into a journal, a sunset walk with no one beside me. Not even the dog I used to have before she died, and no one came to the vet with me. Rachel didn't even call that day. She sent a "thinking of you" text 2 days later, followed by a selfie of her at a pumpkin patch. People always say family is everything, but they never tell you what to do when your family makes you feel like nothing. I tried to remember the last time someone from my family asked me how I was doing, not out of obligation, not out of politeness, but because they actually wanted to know. I couldn't. I honestly couldn't. I tapped my finger on the screen, hovering over the group chat. Family. That's what it was saved as. Irony in bold font. I clicked on Rachel's name first. The photo of her smiling in front of her new car popped up again. I selected block contact. Easy. Quiet. Like closing a window before a storm. I moved on to Mom. Same process. Then Dad. No ceremony. Just click, click, gone. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was electric. Like I had finally shut off a buzzing noise I hadn't realized was driving me insane. My phone sat heavy in my lap, screen dark now, no more group notifications, no more fake smiles or selective affection. I didn't feel better, not exactly. But I felt something else, something dangerously close to control. A new message came in just then. Not from them, but from a coworker reminding me about a Zoom meeting the next morning. I laughed, short and sharp. At least someone remembered I existed. I tossed the uneaten cupcake on the passenger seat, drove home in silence, and sat in my apartment watching the headlights flicker on the wall through the blinds. By the time I went to bed, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to chase them anymore. Not for birthdays, not for dinners, not for attention I had to beg for. They could live in their little group chat bubble, celebrating Rachel's new cars and kids and cute family moments. I was done playing the quiet daughter who took the scraps. Because the thing they didn't realize was this: when you forget someone long enough, eventually they forget you right back. And when that happens, you don't just lose a connection. You lose the right to call it family. And maybe, just maybe, I was finally okay with that. When you grow up in a house where love is distributed with a kind of precision usually reserved for science experiments, you learn early which beaker you belong in and which one always gets to overflow. My sister Rachel overflowed, if you want to call it that. Every scraped knee, every failed test, every breakup with some boy who worked at the local tire shop became a family emergency, a moment of collective mourning and recovery where we all gathered to remind her that she was wonderful, beautiful, special, and worthy of love no matter how badly she messed up. I, on the other hand, was expected to simply not mess up in the first place. I remember in middle school when Rachel forgot to do her science project until the night before it was due, and somehow my mother spent the entire night gluing together a model of the solar system for her. I remember this because I had done mine 3 weeks in advance and had to beg for a ride to the office store for poster board and markers. "You're so responsible," my mother said when I came home with my supplies in a backpack I had bought with babysitting money, because at that age I already knew asking for things didn't usually go my way. That phrase followed me like a ghost. "You're so responsible." It sounds like a compliment the first 100 times, until you realize it's a way of saying, "You don't need anything from us, right?" It became a shield they handed me and expected me to wear into every storm while Rachel sat under the umbrella. When she got into a fender bender at 17, my dad showed up at the scene in 15 minutes with a half-eaten cheeseburger still in his hand and wrapped her in his jacket. When I blew a tire in the snow at 23, I waited 3 hours for roadside assistance and then drove myself to the ER because my hands had gone numb from the cold. No one ever knew. I didn't tell them. I'd learned better by then. In high school, Rachel got straight C's and was praised like she cured cancer. I got straight A's and got a pat on the back. Once, I remember scoring 95 out of 90 on a math test. Yep, 95 out of 90. I was just that good. My teacher laughed and told me to frame it. I showed my mom and she said, "Well, of course you did. That's what we expect from you, Em." That was it. No dinner out. No extra slice of cake. Meanwhile, Rachel got taken to Olive Garden for a C+ in geometry because, and I quote, "it was better than the D she had last semester." I don't think it was always intentional. That's the worst part. It wasn't like they sat down and plotted ways to make me feel invisible. It was just how the rhythm of our family went. Rachel demanded, and they responded. I stayed quiet, and they let me fade. By the time I hit college, I was so used to being self-sufficient that I barely noticed how often I solved things without calling home. The time I locked myself out of my dorm in December wearing only socks. The flu that had me bedridden and dehydrated for 4 days. The breakup with Paul that left me crying on the floor of my apartment because I had pushed him away too many times while trying to juggle work and family guilt and my sister's constant phone calls about her own messes. I never once called my parents. I didn't expect them to pick up. They had already decided who I was. Strong, reliable, low maintenance. The one who sends thank you cards on time, remembers birthdays that are never remembered in return, and shows up to baby showers with a gift already wrapped. Rachel, on the other hand, floated through life as the trophy daughter, imperfect, dramatic, needy, but never forgotten. She called them crying when her baby had a fever and got an overnight visit. I called to say I'd been promoted to senior analyst and got told, "That's great, honey." Did you hear Rachel's thinking about going back to school? The only time I remember them actually looking at me, really seeing me, was when I stormed out of a family dinner 3 years ago. We were at Rachel's place, because of course we were, and her husband had grilled steak and everyone was drinking red wine that cost more than my car insurance. Rachel had spent the whole evening talking about how tired she was being a mom and how no one ever helped her and how she just needed a break. And I foolishly said, "It must be nice to have help when you ask for it." The room went quiet. My mother blinked like she'd been slapped. My dad chuckled nervously and said, "Well, Emily, you've always been so independent." Rachel burst into tears and ran upstairs. I stood up, left my half-eaten plate on the table, grabbed my coat, and walked out. No one followed me. No one called. I remember driving home in silence that night, knuckles white on the steering wheel, thinking maybe I had made it up, maybe I had imagined the imbalance. But the silence afterward told me everything I needed to know. They never reached out. Not once. No apology. No conversation. Just a silent agreement that I had ruined another nice dinner. Tonight, after the cupcake, after the car photo, after the final straw, I sat on my bed with my phone in hand and opened my photo gallery. Years and years of family pictures, some staged, some candid, all fake. Smiles at Thanksgiving, posed arms around shoulders at Christmas, Rachel opening gifts while I held the camera. One by one, I started deleting them. Not out of anger, exactly. More like clearing space in a closet you don't open anymore. I went backward through time, Halloweens, beach trips, birthday dinners that weren't mine, deleting like erasing a chalkboard no one had written on for me. By the time I reached the oldest picture, Rachel and I sitting on Santa's lap in matching sweaters, I didn't even hesitate. I tapped delete. Then I emptied the trash. It felt like closing a door. A quiet, final click. And I didn't feel sad. Not even a little. Blocking people isn't nearly as dramatic as movies and bad self-help blogs make it out to be, but it sure as hell feels good when it's done with clarity and zero guilt. There was no tequila involved, no moody lighting or Adele playing in the background, just me sitting on my couch in mismatched socks and a hoodie I've had since grad school, scrolling through my contacts like I was trimming a dead tree in winter. Rachel was first, because of course she was, and seeing her name disappear from my phone like a puff of smoke actually made me exhale out loud, like my lungs hadn't fully expanded in years. Then came Mom, which took a little more time, not because I was torn about it, but because I hesitated on whether to block just her number or also her emails, her Instagram. Her backup number that she only uses when she's at the lake house and the reception's bad. In the end, I blocked everything. A clean cut, like a surgeon making the first incision before removing something infected. Dad was the easiest, strangely. Maybe because he was always halfway gone anyway. Blocking him felt less like slamming a door and more like finally locking one that had already drifted open years ago. The next day came and went without a sound. No messages, no missed calls, not even a passive-aggressive emoji reaction to an old text. I waited for something, some flare signal, some dramatic plea, but there was only silence, and then more silence after that. I went to work, made coffee, walked to the park, listened to my favorite true crime podcast about a woman who faked her own death to escape her family. I found myself rooting for her. By the end of the week, the quiet started to feel suspicious. Not painful, not peaceful, just strange, like a song that suddenly stops mid-chorus and leaves your ears ringing. The first crack in the calm came 8 days in, when I checked my voicemail out of habit and heard Rachel's voice, sharp and bright, and vibrating with rehearsed outrage. She called me cruel, childish, selfish, like I'd committed an unforgivable sin by not responding to the group chat or liking her car photo. She said things like, "We're family whether you like it or not, and you don't get to punish us because you're sad." I replayed that line, "because you're sad," 3 times, as if sadness was the issue, not 5 years of being ignored. As if sadness was a weakness she could diagnose and dismiss, like she was qualified to explain my own feelings to me. Her voice cracked near the end, a little tremble she probably didn't mean to let through, and that's when she said it. Just call Mom, okay? She's freaking out. She says you're scaring her. That part made me laugh out loud, right there in the middle of my kitchen, holding a coffee mug with chipped ceramic and a slogan that said "World's Okayest Person." I didn't feel guilty. I felt like I was finally waking up from a long nap in a house filled with gas leaks. My family had spent decades pretending everything was fine as long as Rachel was okay and Emily was quiet, and now that the quiet was gone, suddenly it was a crisis. 2 days after Rachel's voicemail, I got an email from my mom, or at least what passed for an email. It was a forwarded Bible verse with no message, no context, just a subject line that said, "Thinking of you." The verse was something about forgiveness and mercy, but all I could think about was how she had probably clicked forward while sitting on the couch watching a home renovation show, sipping her wine, patting herself on the back for reaching out. I didn't respond. I didn't even read it twice. I deleted it and marked her address as spam. A petty move, maybe, but deeply satisfying. I started sleeping better. I stopped flinching when my phone buzzed because now it was only work, friends, or spam calls trying to sell me extended warranties. I cleaned out my closets. I threw away old birthday cards from my family that had phrases like "love you so much" written in Mom's loopy handwriting, followed by "hope you had a great day," with no mention of ever being part of that day. I donated clothes Rachel had passed down to me, items she didn't want anymore that Mom insisted I should be grateful to get. Gratitude. That had always been the expectation. Be grateful. Be quiet. Be easy to ignore. It wasn't until the second week that I heard from my dad. Or rather, it wasn't until the second week that I found the letter. A real letter. Handwritten, stamped, folded carefully, and slid through the mail slot like it had been delivered by someone too afraid to ring the bell. My name was written in his shaky handwriting, the same one he used to sign school permission slips back when he still did that sort of thing. I held it in my hand for a while before opening it. There was something about the paper, how deliberate it felt. Like he hadn't written anything by hand in years and didn't quite know how to make the words land anymore. The envelope was unsealed, maybe on purpose. Maybe so I wouldn't feel trapped. I pulled out the paper and read the first line, and that's when my stomach dropped a little. It said, "Emily, I don't know how we got here." And I didn't know if I wanted to read the rest. The envelope had a soft bend across the top, like it had been gripped too tightly in a hand that wasn't used to holding anything fragile, and the handwriting on the front, my name, spelled correctly for once, was unmistakably his, my father's. The same tight, slanted print he used on school permission slips, birthday cards signed on behalf of my mother, and tax notes he used to leave beside the coffee pot in April. The letter inside was only a single page, folded in thirds with the kind of carefulness that feels like a form of apology in itself, and when I opened it, I braced myself for guilt masked as grief or denial dressed in concern. But instead, the first line hit with a kind of sterile gentleness that made my stomach turn. "Emily, I don't know how we got here." That was how it began. "No, I'm sorry, no, I should have called you." No acknowledgement of 5 forgotten birthdays or the emotional trench that stretched between us like a canyon you only notice when you finally bother to look down. Just, "I don't know how we got here," as if the situation had fallen out of the sky and landed in our laps, as if my absence were some great mystery no one could possibly solve. The rest of the letter read like someone trying to write an apology without using any of the dangerous words, the ones that actually mean something. It was filled with vague platitudes about families sticking together, about how he and Mom had been talking a lot lately and wondering if maybe something had gone wrong. He said things like, "We miss you," and "Rachel is worried," and "You've always been the strong one," which, if I had taken a drink every time I'd heard that last line, I'd have pickled my liver before turning 30. There was no mention of birthdays, no recognition of the years I sat alone while they toasted Rachel's every minor accomplishment, No memory of the dinner I walked out on without a single person following me out the door. Just this careful, calculated sorrow, like someone trying to sound sad without actually admitting guilt. I stared at the letter for a long time, my fingers resting on the edge of the page like I was waiting for the ink to rearrange itself into something honest. I even sat down later that night and started writing a response, something polite and controlled and just vague enough to pass for civility, but when I reread what I'd written, all I could feel was exhaustion. The kind of exhaustion that lives in your bones, the kind that can't be fixed with coffee or rest or therapy. I folded my reply in half, then in half again, and finally tore it into pieces so small not even a tape roll and a prayer could put it back together. Instead, I poured a glass of wine and thought about Paul. Paul had been kind, patient, and just distant enough to never really challenge the place my family held in my life. He didn't understand it, but he didn't fight it either, until the night of my 38th birthday, when he'd booked a reservation at a rooftop restaurant downtown and actually dressed up for the occasion, only for me to disappear halfway through appetizers because Rachel had called me sobbing over a fight with her husband about the wrong kind of diapers. I left Paul there, sitting across from a half-eaten beet salad, staring at the empty seat where I used to be. I rushed to Rachel's house, holding her hand while she cried over a man she'd be back in bed with before midnight. Paul didn't say much afterward. He didn't raise his voice. He just looked at me like I'd finally answered a question he'd been too polite to ask. And 6 weeks later, he moved out. I don't know what hurt more, losing him or realizing I didn't even fight for him because I thought family came first. But family always meant Rachel's emergencies, Mom's needs, Dad's silence, and my sacrifices. It never meant showing up for me. It never meant anyone sacrificing anything on my behalf. A few days after my dad's letter, a second envelope arrived, this one with glittery pink stickers on the seal and crooked writing across the front. At first, I thought it was junk mail or maybe one of those awkward cards from a coworker's kid, but when I opened it, I found a single sheet of notebook paper and the unmistakable scrawl of a child still learning how to shape her letters. The note said, "Mommy says you're mad at us, but you should come back. Nana made cookies. I miss you. Love, Lily." The words were innocent, sure, but the note had Rachel's fingerprints all over it. The phrasing, the weaponized sweetness, the subtle shift in tone that made it feel like I was the one doing harm, like I was the one making a child sad because I didn't want to play pretend anymore. It wasn't Lily's fault. She was just the vessel. But Rachel knew what she was doing, playing the sympathy card, dragging her 6-year-old daughter into a conversation I had made very clear I no longer wanted to have. I held the letter like it was something radioactive, both dangerous and delicate, my fingers hovering above the inked words written with strawberry-scented markers. I could almost picture Rachel coaching her, standing behind her, maybe even spelling out the words while pretending it was all Lily's idea. That kind of performance wasn't new. Rachel had always known how to spin pain into sympathy, to gather allies with wide eyes and trembling lips, and now she was pulling her daughter into the same games, the same theater. But the mistake she made this time, the one she couldn't take back, was assuming I would melt at the sight of Lily's handwriting. That I would crumble the way I always used to, fold myself into forgiveness, just because someone said they missed me. I set the letter down slowly, the corners trembling slightly in my hand, and let out a low breath that carried something closer to laughter than sadness. Not a warm laugh. A cold, dry, calculated one. Then I whispered it out loud, just for myself, just once. "You made a mistake bringing the kid into this." And then I smiled. There's something strangely sacred about silence when you finally get to choose it, when you're not the one being forgotten but the one who forgets, on purpose, with precision, like slicing through rotten fruit to reveal the clean edge underneath. After the letter from Lily and the syrupy manipulation disguised as a 6-year-old's affection, I didn't get angry the way I expected. I didn't cry. I didn't punch a pillow or rant to a friend or scream into the night. What I felt was colder, deeper, and far more dangerous than any explosion could have been. It was the kind of stillness that comes after an earthquake, where everything looks intact on the surface, but underneath, the ground has shifted for good. I spent 3 days gathering the material. Not because it took that long, but because I wanted it to. I wanted to feel every click of the mouse, every drag of a photo into the slideshow builder, like I was chiseling my own justice out of years of silence and neglect. The oldest photo I started with was from 5 years ago, taken at a diner in the city, a selfie where I smiled half-heartedly over a slice of banana cream pie with a candle stuck in the center. I'd captioned it, "Solo celebrations are still celebrations," but back then I didn't mean it. I was just trying to convince myself I wasn't crushed. From there, I built the timeline like a slow funeral march. Each year, a different cupcake, a different table, a different version of me getting better at pretending it didn't matter. I didn't use filters. I didn't need them. The expressions told the story: quiet, forced joy in the first one, numb detachment in the second, a nearly blank stare by the third. By the fourth, I wasn't even smiling anymore. And the fifth, the one from this year, I saved for last. The cupcake in my car, the match flickering, my reflection in the windshield as the flame went out. I added a caption in bold white letters across the bottom: "Guess who didn't get a text this year?" But I didn't stop there, because that would have been too easy. I added intercuts, photos of Rachel, lifted from group texts and social media, smiling with gifts in her hands, standing beside shiny new things with that same artificial grin she wore when she was 5 and faking surprise. Under one photo, I wrote, "While Rachel got her third car." Under another, "While Rachel got a party I wasn't invited to." And below a group photo from 2 Christmases ago, where I stood slightly off to the side, barely in frame, I added, "Guess who took the picture?" Then came the final slide. The one I knew would linger in their minds whether they admitted it or not. A picture of me holding this year's cupcake, sitting alone in my car, staring straight into the camera. Not sad, not angry, just done. The caption beneath it read, "Thanks for the silence." It taught me everything. I saved the slideshow as a video and attached it to an email addressed to all 3 of them: Mom, Dad, and Rachel, with no subject line and no message. Just the file. I scheduled it to send at exactly 3 a.m. because I figured that was the hour when even the most self-satisfied people occasionally wake up with a hollow feeling they can't quite name. Then I went into my phone settings and changed my number. Not just blocked, changed. Gone. Erased like a chalkboard. The sound of that final click was quiet, but in my chest, it echoed louder than any scream I could have let loose. A week passed, and for the first time in what felt like a decade, I didn't live with one eye on my notifications. No texts from Rachel. No pity likes from Mom. No guilt calls from Dad. Just clean space. It was like opening a window in a room I didn't know had been sealed shut. I started going for walks without checking my phone. I bought flowers at the grocery store just because I liked how they looked. I read books cover to cover without pausing halfway through to respond to someone else's emergency. Then, one night, the voicemail showed up. Not a call, just a voicemail. From a number I didn't recognize, but I knew immediately who it was. The recording was short, barely a minute, but the rawness in my mother's voice made it feel longer. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't even trying to pretend she was okay. Her voice was cracked, hoarse, like she hadn't slept. She said my name 3 times before she even managed a sentence. "Emily, please, you're breaking the family." That's what she said. As if I had lit the match and dropped it on a house already soaked in gasoline. As if she hadn't walked past my empty chair 5 birthdays in a row and decided it was just easier to keep walking. She ended with, "Just call me. Please. Just let me know you're okay." I listened to it twice, then once more. Not because I was tempted to respond, but because I wanted to feel absolutely nothing when I erased it. And I did. I tapped delete without blinking, without saving it, without even letting my finger hesitate over the screen. Then I went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water, the kind of mundane act that felt like a small, personal ritual, a quiet celebration of choosing myself. Some nights, I still check the blocked list, just to see. But I haven't unblocked them yet.